The city of Alium looked like an endless ocean of bright neon lights, with tall steel buildings reaching up like sharp fingers, casting long shadows on the streets below. Air cars zipped above, cutting through the fog with soft electric sounds, while the streets below were cluttered with flickering holographic signs and crumbling infrastructure. Hidden in the forgotten corners of this huge city was a small, messy workshop. Here lived Lyra, a girl who was more machine than human. Lyra had never had a normal life. She was abandoned at birth and had to survive in a world that didn't care for the weak. Her only comfort came from machines. It started with simple repairs. Fixing broken appliances she found in the trash, playing with old circuits and forgotten gadgets. As the years went by, her skills improved, but so did her mechanical body. A rare disease had taken much of her humanity, forcing doctors to replace parts of her limbs and organs with robotic pieces. Over time, Lyra learned to embrace her metal parts, using them to her advantage. Her workshop was filled with tools, wires, and half-finished robots. The soft glow from various screens was the only light in the dark, windowless room. Her mechanical left arm, made of sleek black metal, moved perfectly as she connected wires to the exposed core of an old robot. "Come on," she said, tightening a screw with her strong grip. "Just one more adjustment, and you'll be good as new." The robot flickered to life for a moment before its eyes dimmed again, making Lyra sigh in frustration. Despite her talent with machines, some projects just wouldn't work. As she stretched her tired shoulders, she heard a clattering noise from outside the workshop door, which led to the forgotten tunnels beneath the city. Curious, Lyra wiped her hands on her jumpsuit and stepped outside, her mechanical limbs moving softly as she walked. The tunnels were dark, damp, and filled with leftovers from a past civilization that had moved on, leaving this underground world behind. Lyra had found many useful items here before, and tonight was no different. Following the sound, she came upon a large pile of discarded technology, with old metal parts and broken robots scattered everywhere, forgotten by anyone who might have cared. But something caught her eye amid the debris, a faint glow pulsing in the dark. Crouching down, Lyra reached into the pile and touched something smooth and cool. She pulled it out and gasped. It was a robot's head, but unlike any she had ever seen. Its design was sleek, with dark metallic skin and strange glowing symbols that pulsed with blue light. Even though its eyes were inactive, they gave off a strange feeling, as if they were watching her. "What are you?" she whispered, turning the head over in her hands. It was clearly alien, nothing like the mass-produced robot she was used to. She had scavenged before this was something special, something different, and most importantly, it was still. Operational. Lyra's heart raced with excitement as she carried the head back to her workshop. Whatever this thing was, she was determined to bring it back to life. For weeks, Lyra worked tirelessly scouring the city for parts that might match the advanced alien technology she scavenged from old warehouses, took apart decommissioned battle drones, and even hacked into high-security tech vendors to find the perfect components. Piece by piece, she assembled the rest of the BA towering frame of black metal and sleek angular lines that looked more like an armored soldier than any civilian droid. Finally, after weeks of sleepless nights and obsessive tinkering, the moment came. The robot's body was complete, its sleek limbs and powerful core gleaming in the faint light of her workshop. Lyra had integrated the most advanced AI system she could find, carefully calibrating each component to ensure that the machine would be not just functional but capable of learning and adapting. A true companion. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the final switch. "Here goes nothing," she muttered, flipping it on. The workshop's lights dimmed for a moment as the robot drew power from the gridded systems, winging to life the glowing symbols along. Its body flared brightly, casting strange shadows on the walls. Then, with a soft hum, the robot's eyes flickered open, their faint blue glow locking onto Lyra for a long moment. Nothing happened. Lyra held her breath, wondering if she had made a mistake, if the robot would be nothing more than a lifeless shell. But then slowly the machine straightened its movements, smooth and calculated. Its head turned, scanning the room, and finally its gaze settled on her. Designation Lyra, it said, its voice deep and mechanical, yet strangely calm. Her location, Earth. What are your orders? Commander. Lyra blinked in confusion, her heart skipping a beat. Commander, orders. I just fixed you. Who are you? The robot's head tilted slightly as if processing her question. I am designated AX-13 alien combat model created for advanced warfare and tactical operations. My primary function is the elimination of assigned targets. Secondary function, mercenary for higher awaiting orders. Lyra's mouth went dry. Wait, mercenary? You were supposed to be, I don't know, a helper droid or something. Not a killer. I found you in a pile of junk. I am not junk, AX-13 said matter-of-factly. I was deactivated during a critical mission and abandoned. My systems indicate I am fully operational. Protocol dictates I resume my mission or await new directives. Commander. Lyra, what are my orders? Lyra shook her head, trying to make sense of what she had done. She hadn't just rebuilt an ordinary robot. She had revived a weapon of war, combat model designed for alien missions with unknown capabilities and objectives. I don't know what mission you're talking about, but that's not happening, she said, trying to stay calm. You're not a mercenary anymore. I build you to be a companion, not a soldier. AX-13 was silent for a moment, its glowing eyes fixed on her. Understood. Recalibrating primary function, awaiting new orders. Before Lyra could respond, the workshop's lights flickered and a strange noise echoed from outside. A distant high-pitched whine that grew louder by the second. AX-113's head snapped toward the sound, its posture suddenly tense. They are coming for me, it said, its voice steady but urgent. Hostile forces have tracked my signal. They seek to terminate me. Lyra's eyes widened. Who's coming? What do you mean? The robot straightened, towering over her. The ones who abandoned me. They will not stop until I am destroyed, and they will eliminate anyone who gets in their way. The ground trembled as a distant explosion rocked the city. Above, the entire workshop shook as the distant explosion reverberated through the underground structure. Lyra stumbled, catching herself on the edge of a workbench. The soft whirring of machinery and the usual hum of electronics in her cluttered space were drowned out by the deep, ominous rumble above. The eerie glow from AX-13 symbols pulsed faster, almost in rhythm with the vibrations in the floor, as if sensing the danger approaching. Who are they? Lyra demanded, struggling to keep her voice steady. Her human heart raced in contrast to the cold logic of her mechanical body. Who's coming for you? AX-13 turned its glowing blue eyes toward her, the flickering lights in the room casting strange shadows across its sleek alien frame. They are elite enforcers of the Herot Collective. I was once contracted by them to complete high-risk operations across various sectors of the galaxy. When I malfunctioned, they abandoned me. Now they seek to eliminate me to prevent the completion of my mission or my capture by rival factions. Lyra's mind raced, trying to process the torrent of information. This wasn't just some malfunctioning machine. This was an alien mercenary with a past that reached far beyond Earth, involved in intergalactic wars and shadowy factions she couldn't begin to comprehend. And now those forces had found him and her. You're saying we're about to be attacked by aliens? She asked, still struggling to believe what was happening. Correct, AX-13 replied without hesitation. Their arrival is imminent. Defensive measures are required. Liu's pulse quickened. She wasn't prepared for an alien invasion. Her entire life had been about survival, fixing machines, scraping together enough to get by. Now she was being dragged into a battle she had no idea how to fight. Another tremasure The ground beneath her this time, accompanied by a high-pitched mechanical screech that cut through the night air. Something was coming fast. Lyra sprinted toward her workbench, her mechanical limbs giving her a burst of speed, and frantically grabbed anything that looked remotely useful. Plasma tools, a shock emitter, even an outdated EMP grenade she had once scavenged from a military dump. Her mind raced with possible plans, but none of them seemed sufficient to deal with what was bearing down on them as she turned back to Act 13. The ground above them shattered with a deafening and a blinding beam of light tore through the ceiling of the workshop, scattering debris and electronics everywhere. Lyra threw herself behind a pile of scrap just in time to avoid being crushed by falling beams and metal. Above her, through the gaping hole in the roof, several dark figures descended, sleek, armored beings that hovered effortlessly in the air, their bodies encased in what looked like living metal that shifted and pulsed with otherworldly energy. The alien soldiers landed with the grace of predators there, weapons raised and glowing with a familiar blue light that matched Act 13's own symbols. Their helmets were smooth, featureless except for a single thin slit where cold, glowing eyes peered through. Fugitive Act 13, one of them barked in a strange, distorted voice, "You will be terminated for breach of contract and evasion of capture, surrender, or be annihilated along with any human sympathizer." Lyra froze behind her cover, hard hammering in her chest. She wasn't equipped to deal with this. These were no ordinary soldiers. The way they moved, the energy, weapons they wielded, everything about them screamed that they were far beyond anything she had ever encountered. For a moment, fear gripped her, paralyzing her thoughts. She glanced at Act 13, waiting for its reaction. Act 13 didn't flinch. The towering robot stepped forward, positioning itself between Lyra and the advancing soldiers, its frame casting a long shadow over her, engaging defensive protocols. It said calmly, its deep VO carrying an authority that sent chills down Lyra's spine. Without warning, Act 13 surged forward with terrifying speed, faster than anything its bulky frame should have allowed in one fluid motion. It raised its arm, and from its forearm an energy pulse shot out, striking one of the alien soldiers square in the chest. The soldier stumbled back, its armor sizzling where the energy hit, but quickly recovered, firing a volley of blue plasma rounds at Act 13. The alien mercenaries dodged with unnatural precision, moving like a predator on the hunt, its sleek LMS bending and shifting in ways that made Lyra's breath catch. The workshop became a war zone in an instant. Blast of blue energy ricocheted off walls, sparks flew, and debris scattered everywhere, whereas Act 13 engaged the invaders in a deadly dance of combat. Lyra crouched behind the workbench, peeking out just enough to witness the chaos unfolding. Act 13 was outnumbered, but it fought with ruthless efficiency. It grabbed one soldier by the throat, crushing its armor with a single powerful squeeze before throwing it into another. The sound of cracking metal and hissing energy filled the air, and the alien attackers moved with lethal precision, their weapons discharging beams of pure energy that seemed to cut through the very air itself. But Act 13 was faltering. Lyra could see it, the way its movements were growing just a fraction slower, the faint flicker in its glowing eyes as its power reserves drained with each high-energy maneuver. It was an alien combat model, but it wasn't invincible. The soldiers were wearing it down, and Lyra knew they would overwhelm it if something didn't change. As she watched, one of the alien soldiers, quicker and more agile than the others, managed to sneak up behind Act 13, raising its plasma rifle to strike. Without thinking, Lyra grabbed an EMP grenade from her belt and threw it with all her might. The grenade bounced off the floor and landed near the alien soldier's feet, exploding with a high-pitched whine. A wave of energy surged through the room, disrupting the soldiers' systems and making them stagger. Their armor flickered with energy. EX-13, better protected from such attacks, took advantage of the moment and unleashed a powerful series of strikes, taking down the remaining soldiers with brutal efficiency. In less than a minute, it was over. The last of the alien soldiers lay crumpled on the floor, their sleek armor sparking and smoking. The room was a mess, with rubble everywhere and equipment shattered, and part of the roof had collapsed. But the invaders were gone, and AX-13 stood victorious, its glowing eyes dimming slightly as it stepped back from the destruction. The only sounds were the crackling of damaged electronics and the faint hum of machinery still trying to work. Lyra stood up, her legs shaking, and cautiously approached AX-13. "Are they gone?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. EX-13 turned its head toward her, the soft blue light in its eyes flickering. "They are neutralized," it confirmed. "However, more will come. These were just the first wave. They won't stop until I am destroyed or taken." Lyra felt a twist in her stomach at the thought. She hadn't asked for any of this, but now she was caught in a battle much bigger than she could have imagined. She glanced at the fallen alien soldiers, their bodies motionless but still scary in their design. "We need to leave," she said finally, realizing the seriousness of the situation. "If more of them are coming, we can't stay here. This place isn't safe anymore." EX-13 stood silent for a moment and then nodded. "Agreed, but we will need more than just a way to escape. We must prepare for their pursuit. They will track us wherever we go." Lyra's mind raced. She had built AX-13 to help her, to ease her loneliness and give her a friend, but this was something else entirely. She felt in over her head, but she couldn't leave AX-13 to face this alone. After all, she had brought it back to life. It was more than just a machine now. "All right," she said, determination firming in her voice. "We'll figure it out. We'll find a way to survive. But first, we need to get out of here." As she gathered what little she could salvage from the wreckage of her workshop, the truth hit her hard. Her old life was over. She wasn't just a scavenger girl living in the forgotten parts of a megacity anymore. She was now part of something, much bigger, a conflict that stretched far beyond Earth with enemies that would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. And then somehow against all odds she had just chosen to stand and fight alongside, a mercenary from another world tonight. Air outside the ruined workshop was heavy with smog and the faint hum of distant city life, but as Lyra and AX-13 emerged from the underground tunnels, leaving the wreckage of her old life behind, the chaos of the sprawling metropolis above seemed distant and unimportant. They slipped through the darkened alleyways of Alium's industrial district, where towering factories belched steam and toxic fumes into the sky. The neon lights of the upper levels, barely visible through the haze, AX-13 moved with purpose, scanning the surroundings for threats. Its glowing blue eyes sweeping every shadow. Lyra followed, her mechanical legs making her strides quick and silent. The adrenaline from the earlier battle still coursed through her system, but beneath it was a growing sense of dread. She had just fought off an alien strike team with the help of her robot she had built from scrap, and now more of those soldiers were coming for them. "What's the plan?" "Exactly," Lyra whispered as they moved through the shadows of the alley. "If more of them are coming, we need somewhere to hide, somewhere safe." "There are no safe places," AX-13 replied in its calm, steady tone. "They will track my signal anywhere on this planet. However, I can disable their tracking temporarily. It will give us a short window of time to strategize and prepare." Lyra chewed her lip nervously. "And how long is temporarily?" "Approximately 72 hours before they recalibrate and resume pursuit." 3 days, Lyra let out a shaky breath. "That's not a lot of time to come up with a plan." AX-13 stopped at a junction between alleyways, its head tilting slightly as it scanned the area. "Correction, it is adequate if we prioritize defense and countermeasures. I require access to a higher grade power sourced to enhance my combat capabilities. You will also need to equip yourself for the confrontation. Lyra frowned. Me equip myself? What do you mean you will need to engage in combat? Lyra froze her pulse, quickening at the thought she had never been in a real fight. She had scrapped with petty thieves and had to defend herself in the city's lower levels before, but this was different. These were alien soldiers with advanced weaponry and technology beyond anything she had encountered. How could she fight against that? I'm not a fighter, she said, her voice quieter than she intended. I'm an engineer, mechanic. I don't know how to fight like you. X-13 size glowed faintly as it regarded her. You're built me. You possess skills that go beyond combat. You understand technology on an instinctual level. Use that to your advantage. Weapons are tools just like any other machine. You must adapt. Lyra swallowed hard, feeling the weight of X-13 words pressing down on her. It was right in a way she had always been able to fix and build machines, seeing them as extensions of herself. If she could apply that same thinking to weapons or defenses, maybe she stood a chance, but the thought of putting herself directly in harm's way sent a cold shiver down her spine. She was pulled from her thoughts as X-13 moved, suddenly pressing itself against the wall of a nearby building. We are not alone. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She followed X-113's lead, peeking around the corner of the alley. Two dark figures approached from the opposite end of the street, their silhouettes barely visible through the haze. As they drew closer, the faint glimmer of their armor became clear. More of the Herrick soldiers, their bodies covered in that strange shifting material that seemed to absorb light. Lyra's breath hitched in her throat. How had they found them so quickly? I thought you said we had time, she hissed under her breath. Not enough, it seems, X-13 replied, its voice still calm. They've deployed a secondary tracking team. They must have anticipated my attempt to disable their systems. We need to engage now before Lyra could respond. X-13 stepped out of the shadows and raised its arm, unleashing a pulse of concentrated energy that lit up the dark alley with an electric blue glow. The nearest Traic soldier barely had time to react before the blast hit him, sending him crashing into the wall. The second soldier immediately mentally opened fire, blue plasma rounds streaking through the air toward X-13. Stay down, X-13 shouted, its voice losing its calm monotone for the first time. Lyra ducked behind a stack of old crates, her heart pounding in her chest as the sounds of battle filled the narrow alleyway. She risked a glance at X-13, watching as the robot moved with precision, deflecting incoming fire with its reinforced arms and retaliating with brutal efficiency. But the Herrick soldiers were faster this time, more coordinated. They moved in perfect synchronization, dodging X-13 attacks with practiced ease and closing the distance between them. Lyra's mind raced. She couldn't just sit there hiding. She needed to help, but how? Her eyes darted to the tools in her belt, her mind instinctively searching for a solution. Her hand hovered over a small device, a shock emitter used to reboot electrical systems. It wasn't much, but maybe it could buy them some time. Her mechanical fingers flexed, feeling the cool metal of the device in her palm. She had modified at once to deliver a higher voltage, hoping to use it as a non-lethal defense. In case she ever got into trouble in the lower districts, this would have to be good enough. Without thinking, Lyra darted out from her cover and sprinted toward the nearest soldier. Her enhanced legs carried her faster than she had anticipated, and before the soldier could turn to react, she slammed the shock emitter against its back, triggering the device. The soldier let out a distorted growl as arcs of electricity crackled across its armor, sending it into a brief spasm. Its weapon dropped to the ground, and the alien collapsed temporarily, immobilized. But the victory was short-lived. The second soldier, larger, more heavily armored, snarled something in an alien language and lunged at her with Terrifying speed, Lyra barely had time to move before the solder's gauntlet fist swung toward her. She threw herself to the ground, narrowly avoiding the blow, and rolled behind a dumpster for cover. Plasma fire erupted from the soldiers, weapons striking the metal container. Inches from where she crouched, her heart raced, panic rising in her throat. She wasn't built for this. She wasn't Axe 3, a battle-hardened machine. She was just a girl with a mechanical arm and a shack emitter axe. She shouted, her voice cracking with fear. Axe 13 was already moving. The robot charged toward the remaining soldier, its powerful arms deflecting the plasma rounds with ease. In one swift motion, it grabbed the soldier's weapon and crushed it in its grip before delivering a devastating punch that sent the alien sprawling across the alley. The fight was over as quickly as it had begun. Lyra sat on the ground, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. The shock of what had just happened washed over her in waves. She had helped. She had actually taken down one of the soldiers. Axe 13 approached her, extending a hand to help her up. You acted quickly and effectively. That was well executed. Lyra took the offered hand and stood, her leg still shaky from the adrenaline. Yeah, well, I didn't think I'd survive a fist fight with an alien mercenary today, she muttered, rubbing the back of her neck, but thanks, the faintest hint of a smile tugged at her lips, though it was quickly replaced by a frown as she looked at the fallen soldiers. What do we do now if they tracked us this fast? We don't have much time before more show up. Axe 13 size glowed softly in the dim light of the alley. Correct, we will need to secure a higher vantage point and establish a defensive perimeter. I will require a power source to function at full capacity. Lyra nodded, her mind already working through the logistics. I know a place, she said after a moment. An old tech warehouse abandoned. It's been off the grid for years. We can hold up there, find the parts we need, and plan our next move. Lead the way, Axe 13 replied, stepping aside to allow her to take point. As they moved deeper into the city, away from the scene of the battle, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The Herat Collective wasn't going to stop coming for them, and the more they fought, the closer they seemed to get to disaster. But beneath her fear was a flicker of something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time, a spark of hope. She wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in her life, she had someone, something fighting alongside her. And for better or worse, she wasn't going to give up without a fight. The sky above the city of Alium had turned a deep, swirling violet by the time Lyra and Axe 13 reached the old tech warehouse nestled within the decaying outskirts of the industrial district. The building had long been forgotten by the city's inhabitants, abandoned to rust, and ruined vines and debris covered the exterior, and the walls were riddled with holes. But Lyra knew it was a perfect place for them to regroup. She had used the warehouse as a hideout before, a place where she could salvage parts and work on her projects in secret. It was off the grid, untouched by the prying eyes of the authorities, and she hoped the Herat Collective inside the massive structure was a maze of dusty shells, and tall piles of discarded technology surrounded them, and holographic displays flickered faintly in the corner, reminders of when the warehouse was a busy center of innovation. Now, it was quiet except for the hum of the city outside the broken windows. "We can sit up here," Lyra said, her voice echoing slightly in the large empty space. She pointed to a small room tucked into a corner behind a wall of rusty machinery. "That room should have some power sources we can use. It's not much, but it'll be enough to recharge your systems and keep us safe for now." EX-13 nodded, its glowing eyes scanning the area. "This location is suitable. I will secure the perimeter and prepare the necessary upgrades. You should rest, Commander Lyra." "Rest," Lyra scoffed, though she felt exhausted. "We have more important things to do than rest." You won't be able to work well without enough recovery time. AX-13 replied calmly but firmly. I will handle the defenses. Lyra hesitated for a moment, but then realized AX-13 was right. She was running on empty, and the last few hours had pushed her to her limits. Now that they had a temporary safe place, she could finally catch her breath. Fine, she muttered, but don't get into another fight while I'm out. The X-13's glowing eyes flickered. Understood. With that, Lyra went into the small room she had pointed out. The dusty floor creaked under her feet, and the stale air smelled faintly of old electronics and oil. It wasn't perfect, but it was a space she could use. She leaned against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the cold floor. Her mechanical limbs felt heavier than usual, and her joints were stiff from overuse. She ran her hand over her smooth left arm, feeling the cold metal beneath her fingertips. Her mind was buzzing, replaying the day's events over and over. Finding the X-13, the battle in the alley, and realizing she was now involved in a huge conflict she couldn't fully understand. The weight of it all pressed down on her. But underneath the fear and exhaustion was something else, something that made her heart race. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running away from something. She was running toward something. AX-13 wasn't just a machine anymore. Lyra had built it and brought it back to life, but it was more than just parts. It had a purpose, a mission, and somehow, she was now part of that mission. She didn't fully understand it yet, but she knew she couldn't turn back. The X-13 had become more than her creation. It was her partner in a fight she hadn't chosen but couldn't avoid. She closed her eyes, the dim glow of the warehouse fading as exhaustion took over. Lyra woke up to the sound of faint beeping, alerting her that something was nearby. She blinked, feeling groggy, and sat up. Her mechanical limbs felt a bit lighter after the short rest. The room was still lit by the pale light of the warehouse's old lighting system, but the air felt different, as if something had changed. She stood up, stretching her arms, and stepped out into the main area of the warehouse. The X-13 was in the center, its frame glowing softly as it worked on some complicated upgrades to its systems. Cables snaked from a nearby terminal into its back, drawing power from the building's ancient electrical grid. Makeshift defenses had been set up, including automated turrets made from scavenged materials and motion sensors hidden in the shadows. It was a fortress now, in a way. You've been busy, Lyra said as she stepped closer, her voice still thick with sleep. The X-13 didn't turn, but its voice replied, The perimeter is secure. I have rerouted power from the buildings, auxiliary systems to optimize energy. Flow this should delay the Hera. Collector's ability to track U.S. Lyra. Let out a low whistle. Impressive you did all this while I was out. Correct, however, I require your assistance to complete the final stage. Of the upgrades I have identified an additional power source deep within the city it is. Heavily guarded, but it is essential if I am to function at full capacity. Lyra frowned. Heavily guarded, you mean it's in one of the corporate sectors? Yes, the power source belongs to the Seidel Corporation, which specializes in advanced weapons development. They possess the technology required to fully recharge my systems and enhance my combat capabilities. Lyra chewed her lip. Breaking into a corporate facility wasn't exactly her idea of a good time. The megacorps that controlled the upper levels of the city were notorious for their ruthless security forces, not to mention the automated defense systems that would fry any unauthorized personnel who even looked at their facilities the wrong way. But if X-13 needed the power, there wasn't much choice. The Herrick wouldn't stop hunting them, and they needed every advantage they could get. All right, she said. Finally, we'll do it, but we'll need to plan in some gear. I have already begun planning. X-13 replied, turning toward her. There is a window of opportunity during